Welcome everyone to Welcome Bakers, as I guess what they say on the British baking show. My name is Melissa Austin Weeks, and I am the lifestyle blogger and hospitality expert from Home with a Twist. And I'm so happy to have you here in this virtual baking class. We are going to be learning how to make my cranberry a Christmas cake. And the recipe can be found on my website at homewithatwist.com. Just search cranberry Christmas cake. You may already have the recipe and you printed it and you're good to go. Let me go over the ingredients with you. You're going to need 3 eggs, 2 cups of sugar, 3/4 cup softened butter, a teaspoon of real vanilla, not imitation. There's a difference, and we'll talk about that in the class. 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and a 12-ounce bag, a full bag, this size, of fresh cranberries. Those are Ocean Spray. You can buy any brand that you want. I think Ocean Spray are typically what are most popular right now. The great thing about cranberries is if you love this recipe, I always buy 3 or 4 bags more than I think I'm going to need, and I can put them in the freezer, and they will last in the freezer for probably about 6 to 8 months. And the only thing that would happen to them is that maybe they just might lose their freshness. But they just make great add-ins to if you're going to make banana bread or pumpkin bread or cookies. They're just a great little add-in. Oatmeal, they're great in fresh, hot oatmeal. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I have been blogging now for probably about 17 years. I started my blog from the encouragement of my sister. At that time, I was taking care of my parents. So my husband and daughter and I were caregivers. And I blogged about my experience as a caregiver, hoping that there were some other women out there who might value my messaging and find a sense of support in my community. Once my parents passed away, I took a break from writing to kind of process my grief and the loss of my parents, and came back as Home with a Twist, which is a love letter to my mother for everything she taught me about hosting and hospitality and making people feel welcome in her home. And I add my own modern spin. So on Home with a Twist, you can find me at homewithatwist.com, and also on Instagram at Home with a Twist, and on YouTube at Home with a Twist. I share heirloom recipes, hosting tips. I share glimpses of my home. I talk about vintage collections. I love to collect vintage finds. I have a dish pantry full of 3 generations of my family's dishes that I love it because it's all in one spot. It makes it easy to host. And I just share joyful living. I share a lot of recipes on my blog, printables, some free things, some at very low cost, like gift cards, gift tags, just all kinds of fun things. So I'm glad to have you here. What I like to do during my baking classes is walk you through, and these baking classes could be for the seasoned baker that just wants a new recipe or for a beginner. And I walk you through some beginning steps that are essential in order to be a proficient baker. Baking is a lot different than cooking. In cooking, for example, if you're going to make spaghetti sauce, it's a pinch of this, it's a pinch of that. In baking, it is very precise. So I'm going to be walking through with you how to properly measure your ingredients, and then just some basic tips. So what you want to do is go ahead and turn your oven on to 350. And now we're going to grease our pan. Now for this cranberry Christmas cake, you have lots of options. You can bake it in a 9 by 13 metal pan. I always encourage my students to bake in metal and not glass. And the reason is because glass is a little bit different temperature than metal. Glass is really better for something like a pudding, a cold dessert, or maybe a casserole or a vegetable casserole or a vegetable dish. You want to stick to metal for your baking. Now, you can do a 9 by 13. You can do disposable, or you can do squares like a brownie size pan. You could probably make this cake into 2 square pans. One thing I love to do is buy the metal square aluminum pans that you can buy in the dollar store, in the grocery store, Target. They come with plastic lids. And those are great for baking in because you can wrap that up in a really pretty bow with a gift tag and drop that off as a Christmas present. I'm going to be making mine because I think this is really pretty if it's baked in a round cake pan. And these are just Calphalon metal baking pans. I'm gonna make one recipe will go into two baking pans. Now, the round pan, I'm just gonna kind of see how much better I can get into it. If I feel like that I can do two, then I will, and it not be too thin, then I will do two pans. Otherwise, I think with a round 9-inch, it might work better to just do the one recipe in a round can. But we're gonna see. Sometimes baking is all about trial and error. I'm getting ready to sneeze. That's what baking is. Sometimes you may start a recipe and be like, this recipe sounds amazing. You bake it and it may not turn out. Let's talk about some of the things that you put in it that may have impacted that. So I'm going to go ahead and spray this with some non-cooking spray. If you don't like the taste or you don't buy non-cooking spray, you can grease your pan with a little bit of softened butter on a paper towel. So I did the sides and the bottom and made sure to get it into the corners. Now, a little tip, so that you don't have to get out your entire container of flour. I did only because I'm going to use the flour for the recipe, is I like to put a small thing of flour in a jar in my spice rack. And this is called bench, B-E-N-C-H, like a bench that you work on, a garden bench, a baking bench. Bench flour, because if it's handy, you can just use it if you want to just sprinkle a little bit into a baking pan. If you need like a little tablespoon of flour that you want to put into a roux to make a gravy or a sauce, you don't have to get out the entire jar. And you can just sprinkle in what you need. And I'm making sure to get all around. See how I'm covering the inside of the pan with my flour. You don't want to have any bald spots because that might possibly make your cake stick. And what I'm hoping to do is after I bake this, after it cools, I'm going to dump it out because this is not a disposable pan. One of my rules is you never want to drop off one of your good non-recyclable pans to a friend because then they're obligated to have to wash it and return it to you, or you have to go back and make sure to get it back. So I always give people either a real pretty cake plate that I found at Goodwill or at the vintage store that I don't mind parting with, or in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert it onto a cardboard round cake holder and then wrap it in cellophane. All right, so I think we're good on that. I'm going to just take this to the trash and dump out flour. You want to give it a good bang either over your sink or over your trash can so that all the excess flour is out. So now my pan is completely covered with the flour and oil so that my pan won't stick. Now, you always want to read through your recipe, make sure you have all your ingredients. There's nothing worse than getting right in the middle of a recipe and you realize, shoot, I don't have that ingredient. So I know I have everything. I've gotten it all out. I would encourage you not to be one of these bakers who gets out the eggs, puts the eggs back, gets out the sugar, puts the sugar back. In other words, you're only getting out one ingredient and then putting it away. The reason that that is not efficient is that not only are you moving back and forth, you're wasting some steps, but you also could possibly miss an ingredient because you're going back and forth and you're distracting yourself from the recipe. So if you have everything out in order of how you make it, you can easily double check yourself at the end of the recipe and make sure everything got put in because we live in a world of distractions right now. The phone is you're hearing the texting, you're hearing the phone ring, your kids need you, work texted you. I mean, just all kinds of things are keeping you from focusing on your task at hand. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to put 3 eggs into my mixing bowl. I like a stand mixer for this recipe because one of the things about this recipe is the leavening process comes from mixing your eggs and your sugar until they're really nice and incorporated and to almost double in size. Now, if you don't have a stand mixer, don't panic. You can still use a hand mixer, but know that you're going to be committed to mixing a little bit more time than it would, in other words, you're going to be holding that mixer, the hand mixer, a little longer than if you could just do this and walk away and do something else with a hand mixer, with a stand mixer that does it for you. I have this attachment on. I'm going to go ahead and put the bowl in there. Now with eggs, you don't want to just put your eggs in the bowl directly. You want to have a dropping off point for your eggs. The reason is because I have never had this happen, knock on wood, but sometimes eggs can be spoiled or bad. And there's nothing worse than getting committed to a recipe and you cracked an egg into all of your ingredients and the egg does not look good. So we always want to crack our egg into a bowl first and take a look at it. And in this case, my egg looks great. So I'm going to dump it into my mixing bowl. And then we're going to do egg number 2. Now, your eggs really all of your ingredients need to be room temperature unless your recipe says otherwise. And the reason is if it's all one temperature, it's going to more evenly bake. If you put cold eggs in a recipe, it may impact your baking because little pockets of cold are going to be mixed in with the rest of the room temperature batter. So that's why a recipe says room temperature butter, room temperature eggs, so that everything is one temperature before it goes into the oven. So all my eggs look great. I've got my 3 eggs in there, and we're going to go ahead and start our mixer on low. And I'm going to add in 2 cups of sugar. Now with sugar measurement, you don't need to be so worried about it being precise. It's not like flour, and I'm going to show you what I mean in just a minute. I keep my baking ingredients in these big anchor hocking jars with a label, and then I put in one of these metal scoops, and that helps me. I think one thing that's really pretty is if you have antique teacups, those are pretty to put down into your jars. And then you're just going to level off the top. So that made an exact 1 cup. Now I'm going to pour that in to my egg mixture. Okay, so that was 1 cup. And now you always want to look at your recipe to make sure you're on track with what you're putting in. So we're going to put in our 2nd cup of sugar. Level that off. So here's my 2nd cup. All right, so your recipe says with the mixer, beat the eggs with the sugar until slightly thickened and light in color. It should almost double in size. Right now it's on stir. I'm going to turn it up to about 4. And we're going to let that beat. At some point, we'll stop and scrape the sides. I'm going to actually turn it up to about a 5 because we're really trying to whip it and get that butter and sugar mixed in. This step is really key to the success of this recipe. Your eggs work as a leavening agent, which means leveling as in rising. So because this recipe doesn't have any baking soda or baking powder, you're really relying on the eggs to do that job for you. So you don't want to skip this step. While this is working, let me tell you about a few other things that I've taught. I love to bake. Baking is probably one of my favorite things as opposed to cooking. I do have some good recipes that were my mother's that are like casseroles and things like that. But I have taught a fall baking class, which is a butterscotch apple cake. That's really good. I have some great recipes on my Instagram that you can comment and it'll automatically send you the recipe for a really good pudding souffle jello. Just lots of good things. I love to share vintage recipes is my passion. But I love to share really any good recipe that I come across. I just think not sharing it, there's a lot of people out there that might like it that recipe. All right, I'm going to turn this off because I want to check the status of our. Now, when it says ribbon, you want to be able to, that's a ribbon. See how it's coming down? Almost like if it were a ribbon of dough. That's a ribbon. If it weren't a ribbon, it would come out in clops, big, but see how it's just like a really thin ribbon. So I'm going to mix it for maybe just about 1 more minute. It won't hurt it if you mix it longer, but it certainly is not going to help you if you don't cook it or mix it as long as it says. And I don't know how this is been about 3 or 4 minutes that this has been mixing. And it says this mixture will form a ribbon when you lift the beaters out of the bowl. So I showed you that. Okay, let's double check it again. And I want to show you that ribbon technique again. So it just comes off like that. And what I mean by ribbon, see how thin it is? So that's your ribbon. Okay, so if that's a new technique you learned today. All right, now we're going to add in our softened butter. Now, if you came home from work and you thought, shoot, I forgot to take my butter out. If your microwave has a soft butter setting, there's nothing wrong with using the microwave to help you move this process along. But what you want to do is if you do have your butter softened on the counter, you want to cut it into slices or into cubes. Makes it a whole lot easier for your mixer to mix the butter in than if you just put the whole stick in there. I would not recommend you put a whole stick of butter in your mixer because you run the risk of it getting caught in your beaters and maybe ruining the motor in your mixer because it's just too much force. So always either take a knife when you have your butter in a bowl and just cut through it to make it into small chunks, or cut it into cubes or slices or something. Okay, don't just put the whole stick in there. That's not good. And we're also going to measure our vanilla. I buy my vanilla at Costco. It is this pure vanilla. It's not, you don't want to ever use imitation. Imitation is like it says, it's not real vanilla, and you will be able to tell the difference. So we're going to put our butter in. Let me get a spatula. And your vanilla. Add the butter and vanilla, and we're going to mix for 2 more minutes. So I've got 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And I don't think this vanilla is very much, and it lasts a long time. So you always have some when you need it for baking. All right, so I'm going to move this out of the way. We're going to put this back down, lock it, and we're going to start off stirring at first until you get it looks like it's going in there. And then we're going to turn it back up to about 4, and we're going to let it beat for about 2 minutes. So we'll look at the clock. While your things are mixing, make sure your oven is preheated if you forgot to turn it on. Do a little bit of housekeeping. Go ahead and put some of these things into your dishwasher. So at the end, you don't have a whole lot of mist coming up. I always like to have a trash bowl to put eggshells, butter wrappers, anything that I'm going to be using. In fact, I'm going to wait because I'm going to put the bag of cranberries in there. Now, it's going to look a little lumpy. You're not going to get all of the butter lumps out, and that's fine. So when you look at this, you'll think, ooh, it's a little lumpy. That's okay. That butter is going to melt into the cake, and it's going to be delicious. One of the things you're going to notice with this recipe is that after it comes out of the oven, it almost creates kind of a crusty layer on the top, almost not like a meringue, but very similar to that. It's not going to be a doughy like cake consistency where you press your finger down and it's going to look like cake, like a cake batter that's baked. It's going to have almost like a little crackling top to it, and that's normal. That's part of these eggs being the base for your recipe. And then we're going to sprinkle it with a little bit of powdered sugar, and that's all you need. This cake does not need icing. It is beautiful, just the way it came out of the oven. Okay, so it's been 2 minutes. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to stir in the flour. So we're not, when we say stir, you can use the mixer, but you're going to put it on the lowest setting. And like for my KitchenAid mixer, there is a setting for stir. You don't want your flour flying out all over, okay? So you want to be gentle on that part. Now let's talk about measuring your flour. This calls for 2 cups. This is what you don't want to do when you measure. If you're new to baking, you never want to stick your measuring cup in there and fill it up like that. And you may think, well, I'm going to take it and I'm going to level it. That's probably more than 1 cup. The reason is because you've packed it in there. Flour needs to be measured with another utensil, either a spoon or, like in my case, I'm using a scoop. You gently fill your measuring cup to the top. Then you're going to go back with a straight knife and you're going to scrape the top. And you're going to get a nice, light, fluffy cup of flour as opposed to just one that you scooped in there. It's okay to do that with sugar because sugar is granular. This is a light, flour is light and full of air. So you don't want to just be piling stuff in there. So you're going to start with your first cup. Go ahead and start. You're going to put it on stir. And you're going to put a little bit at a time. We're not in any rush for this step, the recipe. You want to put in about 1/3 of flour at every step until you start noticing that it looks like it's getting mixed in. Now there's the last of that first cup. Now we're going to do another cup. I hope that you're learning some fun tips during this process. I love to teach people how to do something because it just empowers people and it makes people feel good, especially women. All right, now we're going to add our next cup. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to get my spatula. I'm going to stop my mixer and I'm going to scrape down the sides to get any flour pockets that have collected in that kind of hard to reach spot that sometimes your blender doesn't get to. Just try to get down in there and get that out. And now we're going to finish putting the rest of our flour in. Now, when it comes time for the cranberries, which is the next step, we are going to hand stir those in. Because cranberries are a little delicate, we don't want them to get all smashed and crushed from the blender. This is going to be a thick dough. This is not going to be like a cake batter that pours into your pan. We're going to have to scoop it in with a spatula. Now, we're going to scrape the dough off these beaters. This almost is like a consistency of cookie dough. You'll notice that when we get the cranberries in, it'll kind of loosen up a little bit. The natural moisture from the cranberries will add as kind of like adding liquid to your recipe. So right now you just have a really yummy buttery dough. Push our blender out of the way. let's get in here and again, scrape down our sides. Okay, now we're going to take a bag of cranberries. Oh, the bag even says buy two, freeze one. Isn't that funny? That's marketing for you from Ocean Spray. And we're just going to dump these in. And then we're going to stir very carefully. You don't want to just get in there, and smash them all up. You want to kind of fold them in, fold in the cheese. If anybody watched Schitt's Creek, David said to his mom, what does fold in the cheese mean? Do I like fold it in half, place it in there? What folding in means is just to gently kind of scoop from the bottom and turn it over. So you'll notice this is a really thick batter. And you don't have to do it a lot, but there's what our batter looks like. Just like a gold, like little jeweled rubies are in here. All right, now I'm going to take my pan and we're going to see whether I can get this into one 9x13, well, one round baking pan. And if I can, if it looks like I can, I'm going to try to do two, because this cake can easily make two gifts. What I love to do is just spend a few hours on a Saturday or a Sunday. An offset spatula that looks like this. What I was going to say is what I like to do is set aside a couple of hours on a Saturday or Sunday and bake 3 batches of this. So then I end up with 6 cakes that I can share. And what I do is I put one batch in the oven, and I'm always making those squares. Put one batch in the oven, and then while that batch is cooking, then I whip up my second batch of dough. I think this is going to work for me to be able to do 2 round pans, because you don't really want to fill it all the way to the top. This filled about halfway, but y'all try and experiment. Try first with a 9x13 to see how it works, how you like the recipe. And then after that, if you really like the recipe, then try breaking it up into 2 smaller pans. But that's great for that pan. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grease this other pan. So I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I experimented first. And I'm going to take my bench flour. I'm going to sprinkle some bench flour in there. One time when I taught this baking class, someone thought I was saying bitch flour. No, bench. Like I'm sitting on the bench, coach. Okay, perfect. So now I'm going to dump this into my waste bowl. And now I'm going to scrape the rest of the batter, this is how much I had left. I'm going to put that into my pan. And this is going to make 2 nice gifts. Now, the great thing about this recipe is that the cranberries, as we know, these freeze well. I would not freeze the dough, but you can freeze the cake. So if you wanted to make these now and you knew, I want one of these for myself and my family, go ahead and bake it. Wrap it really good in, I would let it cool completely so it doesn't have any heat. It's room temperature. And then I would wrap it in some aluminum foil, and then I would wrap it in cellophane. And then if you can get it into a Ziploc bag, I would do that. And that will keep it nice and fresh until it's time for you and your family to enjoy this recipe. Okay, I'm gonna set that up out of the way. Get my offset spatula. spread this out. And I started this class, 20 minutes ago? 20 minutes. I mean, so this isn't very easy, doable recipe. This will not take you long at all. And after you make it the first time, you'll be a pro and you can have this as part of your Christmas gift giving, and people will look forward to this every year from you to expect. You can name it. You could call it Renee's Christmas cake. Just keep spreading it around until it's evenly distributed into your pan. Nice and even. Okay, so I have 2 cakes. I probably put more in this first one if I were to weigh them. This one probably weighs a little more. So if you wanted to be really exact, you could put it on a kitchen scale. So this one will probably be, this one that I just did is probably not as thick as this one. It doesn't really matter. It's fine. So we're going to put these in the oven, a 350-degree preheated oven for 40 to 50 minutes. I always start at the 40-minute or the least amount of time first, pull it out, check it with a toothpick or a cake tester. If it needs more time, you can always add more. But if you put it in at 50 minutes and it was really done at 40, you've overcooked your cake. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in. And you want to make sure that you're putting it in the middle rack, okay? And you're going to set your timer for 40 minutes. So one thing you want to make sure that when you do preheat your oven, and I didn't tell you this, is that you want to make sure that your oven rack is in the middle. It's best to do that before you start to preheat your oven, because if I were to have done it just now, I'd have to set the cakes down, open the oven, move the rack, and that would change the temperature of the oven. And then if you put the cake in at the wrong temperature and the oven has to adjust back up to 350, it could impact the outcome of your cake. So we're going to cook that for 40 minutes. And then what you're going to do is, as I said, you're going to check it at 40 minutes. I like these cake testers. I got these from Pampered Chef, but I'm pretty sure you can take cake testers anywhere. It's got a round end and then just like a little metal stick. And you're going to stick it at an angle in the center of what you're cooking. If it comes out clean without any batter on it, then you know that it's done. If it comes out, it still has just a little bit of goo on it, it probably needs to cook a few more minutes. I've been doing this a long time, so I kind of automatically know how many more minutes, but I would start with maybe adding 3 minutes, then check it in a different spot again. When it comes out clean without any batter, but maybe just crumbs, then you know it's baked all the way through. Then you're going to take it out and set it on a cooling rack. If you don't know what a cooling rack is, let me show you. We get down in here in my This is a cooling rack. It has little grates on it. So what that does, it's got little feet on the bottom. It elevates it off of your counter. And if you set it here, then air can circulate all through the surface of your pan and help to cool your pan properly. You don't ever want to just cool your pan like sitting on the counter. First of all, I don't know what kind of counter you have. You could ruin or crack your counter. You don't want to do that. And plus, it's not allowing air to circulate under the pan. So it's still warm under there. And when you go to invert your cake onto a plate, you run the risk of it still sticking on the bottom. All right, so let's talk about, because I'm not going to stay on here for 40 minutes and we'll just chat. We're not going to do that. I'm going to tell you what to do, and then we'll sign off. And when you get your cake out, The recipe says to let it cool completely before lightly sifting powdered sugar on the top. You can choose to leave this, if you're making it a 9 by 13, or even if you're doing it in square pans, you're not going to be inverting this cake onto another plate out of the pan. You're going to cut it and serve it from this pan. Now, I am going to be inverting mine because the pan I made it in is not a pan that I want to give away. I want to keep it. So what I'm going to do is follow the directions for how you would bake a normal cake, which is to let it cool for about 10 minutes, then run your knife around the side and try to get as much lift off the bottom. Then I'm going to invert it onto a cardboard round cake disposable round and then sprinkle my powdered sugar and package it in cellophane. For y'all, if you're doing it in a 9 by 13 pan or disposable square or round cake pans, disposable, you're leaving your cake in the pan and will serve it from the pan. You or your recipients will just cut it like a normal cake into squares and serve it that way. The reason you want to wait to let it cool completely before sprinkling it with powdered sugar is that powdered sugar, when it gets in contact with heat, it melts. It's fine. It won't hurt your cake. It's not going to make it any sweeter, but it's just not going to be as pretty. So you want to wait until maybe wait until you're going to be delivering these cakes or serving these cakes, and then sprinkle the powdered sugar on top. Now, King Arthur Baking Company does sell a non-melting powdered sugar. They sell it not only on the King Arthur website, but they do sell it at Whole Foods and Central Market. So you could look for that and use that, and then you never have to worry about waiting until your recipe's completely cool, especially if you're in a hurry and you're trying to get this out the door to a bake sale or to a party. I haven't tried it yet, but I've heard really good things about it. So that could be something that you could try and then let me know. What I like to do is keep my powdered sugar in a powdered sugar decanter. Let me show you. Again, I used to be a big Pampered Chef fan. I haven't bought anything because I pretty much had everything at one time. But these are little shakers. It has a mesh little top on the bottom, almost like a sieve. And you just turn it upside down and you can sprinkle whatever you want to sprinkle with powdered sugar, French toast, cookies. So this is a really nice thing to have. It's just a powdered sugar shaker. You could use a sifter. They make powdered sugar balls that almost looks um, like a tea cozy that you would put loose tea in, and it's on a little kind of a metal rod, and you shake it. So you can find one of those. These would be great stocking stuffers. If you have family members that are learning to cook and you want to give them stocking stuffers, oops, a powdered sugar, almost lost my mixer there. A powdered sugar sifter would be a really nice little gift to give. So you find it get my thing here. So anyway, that's it. I do have some cute gift tags that are on my website. If you go to homewithatwist.com, across the top, on the far right-hand side, there's a menu that says shop. If you click on that, you'll see a menu called Digital Store. And that's where I have a lot of free downloadable guides on hosting. I have some free recipes. I have free potpourris. I have a Christmas organizing tool. I have all kinds of fun things. And you could probably find some baking labels that you can download for free through the digital store. It's just like checking out when you're buying something, except your balance will be zero and it's a digital file. You'll get an email to let you know you made a purchase. And then you'll get a second email that says Home with a Twist has sent you a digital file. Always check your spam and your junk folders, because sometimes things do go into those folders and then you'll think, well, why didn't she send me my information? I did. It's in your junk folder. It'll say Home with a Twist has sent you your downloadable files. Go click on the box. It'll show you all the things that you have purchased or have put into your checkout cart, and you can save those directly to your device and you'll have them until the end of time. So It has been really fun to gather with you today and bake, and I hope that you learned something new. If you're new to my community, I'm so happy that you're here. On Saturdays, I do post, not every Saturday, but I try to be pretty consistent. I do host what's called the Hostess Journal, and I share just quick and easy tips to add to your hosting skills, fun ideas for centerpieces, my hosting wisdom is what I learned from my mother, is you host with intention and not perfection. I also co-host a podcast called The Sentimental Twist. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube. And every Thursday we have a new episode. So you can always go to Home with a Twist if you want to watch the show, or you can find us on Spotify and Apple. So this has been a lot of fun. I'm so happy that you have been here today, and stay tuned for more fun things in the year ahead.